Looking now at our featured herbs in this section. We've got a few to get through, and there are a couple herbs that only show up really in this section, but cinnamon is not one of them. That one definitely shows up in several different places. So we're going to take a look at it, and we're going to take a look at it in this section because it is a key diabetes herb. It's a diaphoretic, sure is. Astringent, yep. Antimicrobial, yeah, to some degree. Antispasmodic, to some degree. Carminative, that's one of the main properties. And we've got endocrine modulator here in diabetes. Couple different constituents. Now you will see here we've got bark and we've got leaf. And these are actually sometimes thought of as different herbs, and obviously they do have different constituents. In the bark, which is more what we're talking about here, and we often call this one rue gui, and the leaf, or this is actually the twigs is usually how it's done. This is gui de. So this one is more of the, let's get down to it, reinforcing the yang. Both of them will be carminative, and this one is more the diaphoretic. So there are a couple of differences in how, sometimes in how we use TCM and how we use cinnamon, but here we're mostly using it as a warming carminative. So we're talking about the bark predominantly. We've actually got down here bark, occasionally leaf or twig. But we're talking about the bark when we talk about what we've got in here and our main uses. So here we actually don't really have much. We've got nausea and vomiting, diarrhea. So I guess we do have a fair bit of digestion. But I would actually add any cold or damp digestive patterns. I think that's pretty key. That's a big part of how we use cinnamon. It is a carminative. That's what we use it for. Okay. Ginger is actually a fairly close substitute. They're different, obviously. You've probably tried them both, but in terms of their actions, they're fairly similar. And that's useful to know. If you don't have cinnamon, but you do have some ginger, you can pop that in pretty easily. Let's take a look at it. You've certainly seen cinnamon before. This is hibiscus. Let's pull up cinnamon. There it is. That's cinnamon. That is, so we don't actually see any of the twigs. This is all exclusively the bark. Often it's turned into a powder. Lots of pretty pictures here. That is cinnamon. Not much more to say about it. Don't know if we can actually find a picture of the cinnamon tree. Yeah, it's all just pictures of cinnamon. Oh, there's one little leaf in there. There's cinnamon for probably diabetes. Oh, that must be pregnancy. Cinnamon safe in pregnancy. Okay. Let's try this. Let's try cinnamon. I don't even really know. Cinnamon plant. Let's see where that gets us. Is it a tree? Yeah, I thought it was a tree, but yeah, I'm not sure. Sometimes there's lots of stuff I don't know. So that must be a cinnamon tree. Clearly, I have not seen this in the wild. And that is a cinnamon tree. Yes, I think I have seen that because that's where we start to get that bark part. I'd like to see a cinnamon tree someday. I wonder what it smells like. Okay. Let's get back over here. So we talked about cinnamon and we looked at a picture of cinnamon. Now let's get into one of our real diabetes specifics, and that is goat's rue. Now I haven't even mentioned this, but this is actually one of the biggest places that goat's rue is used. It's a great galactagogue. It's in reliably, it's a key ingredient in most breast formulas, most breast milk augmentation formulas. So these are really two things it does. Both of these, pretty clearly suggest it is a true endocrine regulator in terms of its actions. Will augment the effects of other hypoglycemic effects. Sure it will. Yep. Traditionally using combinations to stimulate breast milk, and here's what we talked about. Similar mechanism of action to the biguanides. Not a lot more to say about it. We kind of use it for those two things. We don't really use it for much else beyond those two things. And you might be asking the question, are these two things compatible? I think probably they are. But I've never used, what would you do? Would you use even more of it if you're trying to promote breast milk in a woman who is diabetic? Maybe. Let's take a look at what it looks like. So coming over here. Where have we got it? That's bitter melon, hibiscus. There's our goat's rue, Galiga. This one I recognize. I can't say I've gone out into the woods and said, oh, there's goat's rue. But when I see the pictures here, I say, oh, yeah, I've seen that one. It gets its name goat's rue because it is the rue of goats, apparently. And I don't know this, but this is what I hear. This is the best I can do on that one. I haven't looked it up. It's fairly toxic to goats. Is that because of the blood sugar or other endocrine disruption? Maybe. I don't know. I've never seen any studies where humans eat a lot of it, but apparently goats think it's tasty but then run into problems. So that's our Galiga officinalis, goat's rue. That's probably a good picture of it there. Let's take a look. Oh, I think we've gone too far. Let's get out of that. There it is. That's our goat's rue. Looks edible. I'd probably try eating it if I saw that in the wild. All right, let's come back over here. So that's our Galiga. Coming down next to gentian. I thought I'd show you gentian in this section, not because it doesn't show up in other sections, but we've talked about it a fair bit. I'm pretty into gentian right now. I don't know if that justifies putting it in the lecture, but gentian I think is, obviously, I can't say it's an underrated herb because we use it lots. It's definitely a bitter, but I think it's a better hepatic than most people give it credit for. And I've been really adding it into formulas at like 10 out of 120 grams. As just a little something to sneak in there to give some bitter, to give some action, to promote some digestion. In fact, I even chew it sometimes. It's bitter, but I kind of like that sometimes. So gentian, or often yellow gentian, is particularly, there are a lot of different gentians. That's probably a good picture of it. That's probably a little better. Good picture of it there. See if we can get that to come up. There it is. That is our yellow gentian. Quite commonly grown around here. I can't say I've seen a lot of it in the wild, but I do know a lot of them do grow, certainly in southern Ontario. And I believe there's also a pink and a purple gentian that grow around here as well. Iridoids, that's a little different class of action, and alkaloids. So this herb this is fairly strong. This isn't one you want to necessarily eat. This isn't one that you would take a bite of and be like, oh yeah, let me have some more of that. You would know pretty quickly, that's a herb I don't want to mess with too much. I don't know that there's a lot to say for it. It's bitter, it's a silagogue, it's a hepatic. I think it's not necessarily a carminative, but it does promote the movement of digestion. That's probably a good thing to say about it, is promotes movement of digestion. And I like it for that. I will say, since we're here and talking about it, it's also, you can do it. Oh, look at that. Bitter, specific to improving digestion. Didn't need to write it because I already wrote it. Now, here's something I have been using it for. I like it for headaches, but I like it especially, that's not especially, that's especially migraines. At first onset, and I'll even go one step further, especially visual components. So whenever a migraine has either exclusively those sort of shimmering lights or the auras, I feel like gentian works pretty well. I don't have enough data yet to make a firm conclusion, but I've been recommending it probably for a couple of years now. I would say with reasonably good, actually I would say with quite good results when taken at the first onset of a migraine, especially one that has more visual component, then it seems to work pretty well. Gentian is strong and it's bitter. It's like a punch in the liver, and that, we have to go back to TCM, but most headaches and migraines are related to the liver, and so giving the liver a really good strong punch, a strong squeeze, I think maybe enough to just kind of knock it off, especially that visual component the liver opens into the eyes. So I've been using it, and I'm sharing it with you because I think it's useful. Keep using it. If you find that it's beneficial, hey, let me know. We'll make it a thing. Okay, that is our gentian. Let's look at our next herb. It can be a little bit boring to go through monographs, so I'm really trying to choose only the featured herbs, but it is nice to see the herb and to talk about the herb. If you don't like this section, of course, you can skip it, but I've added it to our videos because I know some people do like it, and I do find it somewhat beneficial to go through. Hibiscus. Okay, you've certainly seen this one before. Let's talk about it, and then we'll take a look at it. So hibiscus, it's a hypotensive. This is its best action. It's an antioxidant. Yeah, that actually is definitely true. Anything that is rich in color, like hibiscus is, has usually anthocyanins in particular, which are those same antioxidants you find in things like red wine, things that are that color, and those are usually quite strong. Quite strong antioxidants. Mild nervine, not so much. Definitely astringent, cooling, yes. I would even cross off mild diuretic. I think it's actually a fairly strong diuretic. Mild alterative, it's an alterative partly because it's a diuretic. This one, I don't know. I've definitely seen this. I'm not so convinced it's an emmenagogue, but I leave it in here because enough traditional use suggests it maybe. And maybe it is. I don't know. So here's our anthocyanins or anthocyanidins. We've got the tannins, of course. I keep drawing this line over and over again. Tannins always equals astringency. Long history of use as a pleasure tea. Broadly considered safe. That's great. Nice in a lot of formulas because it does make things taste better. Sometimes, oh, this is where I saw some of it. It was a herb that was sometimes indicated for recurrent miscarriages, similar to red raspberry. You can actually put those two together and toning and slightly astringing the uterus to try to prevent that miscarriage. I think it's generally considered during, so it says here not established safety rating during pregnancy. I'm pretty confident it is, but that's a decision you have to make for yourself. So we are looking at our hibiscus. Let's take a look at a picture of hibiscus. Certainly, I hope you recognize this one. That's hibiscus. Very large, quite attractive flower. Really, I think quite a broad family. You can see some huge trees. You can see a lot of different colors of the flowers. There's some huge trees around the world. This grows pretty much everywhere where the climate favors it. You can grow it here. I grow some indoors. I actually have a large hibiscus plant beside my bed, as a matter of fact. And I've seen it grown outdoors here, but it certainly doesn't thrive like it does in tropical or at least subtropical climates. That's hibiscus. You've seen it. Makes a nice tea. You've almost certainly had the tea. It's very common. That's our hibiscus flower. Okay, a couple more to go here. And the next two I think will be pretty quick. Oh no, here's our bitter melon. We'll look at this one next, and then we'll look at some of our diuretic herbs specifically. Bitter melon, this is really the only section, although maybe we should see it in a PCOS section, but this is really the only section we see bitter melon at the moment. Different set of constituents. We've got steroidal saponins, we've got charantin, we've got some polypeptides, we've even got some lectins, although a lot of plants have lectins. Some of the lectins here are thought to possibly play a role in its action. We know it is good in treating type 2 diabetes, and this is where the possibly PCOS is, because we know often in PCOS, in fact, they're now sort of saying this is one of the hallmarks of a true PCOS, we'll get into that maybe a little bit later, is actually that blood sugar dysregulation. We know that PCOS obviously is an endocrine condition, and it seems to involve blood sugar regulation or dysregulation. Consumed as food in many Asian cuisines. If you've ever had it, you know why it's called bitter melon. It's bitter. You don't really, this is true. So why do you eat a food that if you have 2 to 3 of them can cause GI pain and diarrhea? Well, it's kind of tasty, and a little bit is not bad. You can put it in soups and stews and things like that. It's not bad. Here we go. In the literature, ongoing consumption of 1 per day, about 25 grams, reasonable efficacy as an effective oral hypoglycemic agent. So this one seems to be pretty legit. Let's go take a look at it now, and we'll see. You can actually kind of see where it gets its name, because it does look like a little melon. There we go. Looks more like a little cucumber, I think, but sometimes you'll see it hollow, but almost always it's full in the middle, kind of like a cucumber. I've had this quite a bit. It's not bad. The tea is very bitter, of course, and the fruit, there's a good picture. The fruit is also very bitter, but it's not bad. You have it with some buttery sauce and things like that. You can have a couple. So that's our bitter melon. Now, you can consume this as food, even medicinally in this case. Most commonly, though, I think it's taken as tea. Would it be stronger as food? Probably. That'd probably be a better way to do it if someone has diabetes. Hey, just go down to the Asian grocery store. I don't think you can see it in your generic grocery stores yet, but get some of this and get in the habit of cooking. It's very easy to cook. All right, that's our bitter melon. Now we've got nettle leaf and dandelion leaf. And I think those are the last two we're going to look at. I'm going to talk about them together. In this case, we're really using them, I would say, interchangeably, and we're using them almost exclusively as alterative diuretic. I don't really, truthfully, you guys probably heard me say this before, I don't really think dandelion's a nutritive, unless you eat it, in which case it's very nutritive, but most people in this context are not eating it. They're using it as a tea. I don't think it's all that nutritive in that sense. Some herbalists would be mad at me for saying that. It's okay. I'm willing to take the risk. We're talking about it here as an alternative diuretic. Now, some would say, of course, this has to be the leaf. Some would even say this has to be mature leaf. Now, some will say late season, but nettle can come up multiple times through a season, so it doesn't have to be necessarily late season like end of August. But the mature leaf, and many will say, especially when it's got the seeds on it, that's the time to harvest it for its, it's an old herbal way of saying it, but it's kidney cleansing properties. Yeah, but I can get into it. And definitely, if you drink a bunch of nettle, and I would say I have noted that there is a difference between the mature leaf and the regular or non-advancing leaf. Obviously, not where it's nettle kind of gets this like grayness that starts to come towards the end. We don't mean that far mature, but the fresh young leaf is really not as nearly as potent as the darker green, hardier leaf. But all that to say, don't worry about it. You don't have to ask when you're getting your nettle, oh, is this mature nettle with seeds or is this regular nettle leaf? It will all still have, I think, the same diuretic effects, the same alterative kidney cleansing effects. Is the mature leaf and seeds a little bit better? Probably, but don't worry about it, in my opinion. Some certainly would say otherwise. Formic acid, that's what actually gives it its stinging property. I don't think it has much of its medicinal benefit, but it might. So let's look, see if there's any other highlights from dandelion leaf, but I don't think there's too much more I want to say about either of them. Yeah, dandelion leaf gets talked about so much, and look how little I've had to say about it here. It is a good herb, nothing wrong with it, but I think of it almost exclusively as an alterative diuretic. And because I think nettle does a little better job of the same job, I mostly favor nettle leaf in those cases, but often I don't use either because there are lots of other diuretics that you can use. Lots of other herbs that have other actions that are also diuretic. Here's our nettle. You've certainly seen this before. If you've been on any of our herb walks, you've seen this before. Looks a little bit at first glance like a mint. It's got that alternating leaf pattern, and it actually has a square stem. I don't think we'll see a picture of that. So at first you're tempted to say, oh, this is a mint family. This is in the Lamiaceae family. It's not. I think it's in the Urticaceae family, but I believe they must be fairly closely related. It's unlikely that they both developed exactly the same leaf and square stem pattern. But from here, I would not be able to tell that that's not a mint. It's really not until you get a little bit closer. That's what I'm kind of looking for here is, do we have one that shows, oh, there, let's look at this picture. So here's what I was talking about. Oops. In terms of, oh boy, here we go. In terms of late season or mature leaf, this would be a mature leaf nettle. You can see its seeds forming or starting to form. Those look like they're pretty well formed, forming in here. So here you would take this is what you'd harvest, and then after you dried it, you would garble it, and garbling is when you just dry it. Now, the sting goes away when you dry it mostly, but I'd probably still wear gloves, and you would include the seeds in there. So if you are harvesting it yourself, I'd probably say harvest it around the time that you start to see this happening, but most of the time you won't. And I don't think you can really see the little spikes here, but when you get close, we have those little spikes, and that's what actually causes the sting. Is there's formic acid in those little spikes, same stuff that's in red ants, that causes the irritation. So that's nettle. Let's look at dandelion leaf. You've certainly seen this before. I hope you're in trouble if you've made it to third semester botanical medicine and you're not familiar with dandelion. You're going to have problems. Here, actually, I kind of quite like this picture because it shows us, yeah, there are a lot of different patterns of dandelion leaf. It often looks like this, but I've seen all of these, and they're actually, as recognizable as dandelion is, there are a number of herbs that make a very similar flower and a very similar leaf pattern. So it's not, I mean, if you see a herb that looks like a dandelion, almost definitely it's a dandelion. But we have some, for example, there's wild lettuce, which grows like it's just like a giant dandelion, and everything's bigger, and it has a milky sap. Well, this one has a milky sap in the stem. This one has a milky. Wild lettuce has a milky latex in the leaf, so that's quite different. And there's another herb that looks almost exactly like wild lettuce called sow thistle. It's almost indistinguishable, only by a little rib underside can you tell the difference. So there are a few herbs that could confuse you, and that's just a few. There are actually a few more that could confuse you in looking at dandelion. But almost certainly, there we go. That's great. Almost certainly, if you're looking at something like that's a dandelion, it's a dandelion. There we go. We've got the head, the stem, the root. Interestingly, we break these down. We don't use the stem, And we use the leaves as a leafy alternative, and we use the root as a hepatic. In TCM, they just use the whole thing, root, leaf, and stem, and flower, and they use it really as a pretty potent alternative, mostly for the liver. I've long thought this. I only recently learned that the stem was used in TCM, but I've long thought the stem had some medicinal properties. Because if you break it open, there's that milky white latex. And we do know in Western botanical medicine that that gets used as a topical escariotic for plantar warts with some really good success. And also very abundant, so it's a great thing to use. So I've often thought there's probably something quite medicinal in there that we're not using. We know that the latex of a close cousin that we're just talking about of wild lettuce, Lactuca, also is a big part of what we use. So why not the latex in here? So I'm going to start experimenting with that. I might, this summer, I might harvest a bunch of fresh dandelion and maybe try just the stem, or the stem and the flower. I haven't decided yet, but I think there's probably something to it. That's our dandelion, and that is our nettle leaf, and that is the end of our featured herbs in this section. I hope you've enjoyed this set of videos, and we'll be back with another one soon enough.